Hello, happy day. I have a lot of information about Neptune in Aries, and I wanted to put together just a very informal deep dive on Neptune and Aries, and this might be multiple parts. I don't really know. I don't make videos like this very much. I'm not a video editor by any means. So we're just gonna see how it goes and kind of hope for the best. I actually tried to do this a couple days ago and I just kept getting so frazzled and worried about it being perfect. So I'm just gonna disband that. I'm gonna share some of the research. I've got lots of pages of notes that I've made. So we'll just go through it. So Neptune is shifting into Aries. Neptune, being one of the further away planets, moves very slowly. So it stays in each sign for about 14 years. Sometimes it's more like 16. It just kind of depends. So it's going to move into Aries. It's been in Pisces since February of 2012. I'm pretty sure that's when it entered. So it's been a little while. We've had this energy for a bit. So you can use that for yourself. You can think back to 2012, what was going on. Um, what maybe even holy cow. Okay, no. 2011. 2011, it went into Pisces, April 2011. So that's a while ago. You can look at, let me share my screen. You can look at where, so this is the natal chart of the United States of America. That's what we're going to focus on today, what was going on in America the last time Neptune was in Aries. But you can look at your own chart and find where Neptune is right here. This is where Neptune was in the sky when the US was born. So it was in the ninth house. You see that in the ninth little pizza pie slice. It's at 22 degrees of Virgo. It's pretty close to the midheaven. So that will give you clues about your inherent qualities. To me, just very simply, very rudimentally, Neptune in the ninth house tells me that there's a lot of like hope. There's a lot of hope with America. People come to America for the American dream. There's this like really big idealism around America. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of optimism. Neptune it kind of rules all things that are related to illusion, imagination, dreams, spirituality, but then the flip side of those that would be like dissolution and confusion, maybe a little manipulation, maybe deception, some smoke and mirrors. So you can look to see where Neptune was at the moment of your birth to get clues about that aspect of your life. The house that the planet falls in shows the area of your life that the planet's energy influences, and then the sign shows kind of how that energy shows up. So you can look at that to get an idea of what Neptune was doing when you were born, how that affects you. I co-host an astrology podcast with two of my girlfriends, and we have deep dives on all of the houses, all of the planets, all of the signs. You can start to, if you need a little bit of a brush up or this is new to you, you can visit that. It's called Celestial Curiosities on Spotify or Apple. I think it's kind of anywhere you can get podcasts, but I'll put the link below for that resource. So that's where Neptune was when the US was born. I'm going to bring up where the planets are right now. So we'll come down here. Neptune is right here at 29 degrees of Pisces, right at the cusp between the third house and fourth house. This is known as the IC. It is the most private place in the chart. It has a lot to do with what is, your private life, your emotional baseline, your ancestors, your lineage, your mother and your house and parents. So this Neptune will be moving through the United States, fourth house for the next 10 plus years. So that brings some illusion, some dissolution, some maybe manipulation, some smoke and mirrors to the home front. to the home base, to the homeland, the motherland, if you will. And then it will be moving through the sign of Aries, which is action, it is war, it's starting things. Aries is the start of the new astrological year. It is spring energy. You can't stop spring, can't stop in Aries either. So I don't believe that we can use astrology to make like really precise, exact predictions. That's not what I'm trying to do by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not trying to propagate fear. I'm not trying to anything like that. I'm trying to talk about patterns that we can see from the last time this planet was in this place and just start to think about that. What themes can we maybe expect over the next 14, 16, whatever years? I think it moves out of Aries in 2039. So we've got some time with this transit going on. So let's dive in, shall we? The last time the last time that Neptune was in this place, in the fourth house in Aries in the United States chart was 1861. So April 14th, 1861. April 12th, 1861, the American Civil War kicked off. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of years. So 1861, 1862, 1863, and 1864. This is not all encompassing. This is, I'm going to try to, we can come back to things that I missed because I just chose to focus in on a couple things from that time frame. Okay, so during this window, 1861, the Civil War is just kicking off. Obviously, leading up to this time, it's not like it just came out of nowhere. Like there's conflict. The North and the South of the US were separated. They were at that point operating with different presidents. It was really, I imagine it was a wild time to be a human and just watching, kind of like today. So 1861, they are acquiring warriors. Both armies are expanding. In business astrology, Neptune corresponds with mergers, acquisitions, and like where there's inspiration. So I think it's funny that the armies were actively acquiring, they were doing everything they could to acquire more soldiers, because I think when the war started, maybe there was only like 16,000 soldiers for the whole United States. And obviously, like soldiers in the South would revoke their alliance with the army and they would join the Confederacy. I don't think those are the right words, but I hope it paints paints the picture nonetheless. They were acquiring warriors. How were they doing that? Lots of like propaganda and like posters and rallies and patriotic speeches and parades and posters and all sorts of things. With that makes me think of another one of Neptune's things that it rules over, and that's that illusion and idealism. So both sides of like the opposing sides they're creating the ideals. It's like idealistic patriotism. Like our side is the one you should be fighting for, and here's all the reasons why. And just really inflating their own sides to make them look more inviting, appealing. They want people to join, like advertising for the war. Neptune has a lot to do with advertising as well, because advertising isn't as simple as it seems. There's a lot of psychology that goes into advertising, appealing to people's ideal views or ideal things that people want. So they're playing with a lot of idealism related to war. Neptune and Aries, that's so funny to me. Each side needed to make more structured and deliberate plans for recruitment. They realized very quickly into like 3 days into the war that like, oh, this volunteer thing isn't really working. We need to get a little bit more deliberate. When the war began, Southern officers resigned from the US Army and joined the Confederacy. recruitment drives launched at Fort Sumter on April 12th. So just 2 days before Neptune made that last little shift into the sign of Aries at 0 degrees. President Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers for 90-day enlistments, and they quickly determined that that was insufficient on April 15th, 1861. So just 3 days after the war began, states were responsible initially for getting more soldiers, raising regiments. They did posters, rallies, incentives, newspapers, patriotic speeches, parades, etc. As they figured out that that wasn't going to cut it, they weren't getting enough volunteers, they decided, they passed the Militia Act of 1861. The Militia Act of 1861, there was also a Militia Act of 1862. The first one was that they allowed African Americans to help. They allowed African Americans to be laborers. African Americans were not allowed to engage in combat yet at that point, but they made it so African Americans could contribute to the war by being an extra set of hands and by helping out in other ways. The Confiscation Act of 1861 was also passed, which permitted military confiscation and subsequent court proceedings for any property being used to support the Confederate independence effort, including slaves. So people are starting to lose autonomy over their possessions. That is a dissolving of personal individual autonomy. Neptune in Aries. I mentioned Aries it rules war and starting new things and pioneering and fresh starts, like a little bit of drive, some motivation. And then Neptune it's softer, it's compassion, it is imagination, it is idealism. So I just think it's funny. Neptune dissolves, and Aries also has to do with the individual. So we're starting to see dissolution of individual autonomy. We'll see more of that as the years go by, but I just thought that was interesting to note. So we start out with that. We're starting to kind of erode people's ability to have autonomy over their possessions. Now we move to 1862. We get a little bit more along with that dissolving process. The state's boundaries begin to dissolve a little bit more in 1862. So initially, states had full control over their own militias. And in 1862, the Militia Act of that year was passed on July 17th, 0717. Oh gosh. 1862. Oh gosh, 18. There we go. 62. Passed by Congress. This dissolved states' boundaries. It gave more control to the federal government. So now states initially had full say over their militias, their individual militias. And now 1862 comes along, and this act passed by Congress authorized a militia draft. When the state could, if the state did not meet its volunteer quota, they were allowed to enact a draft. This also allowed African Americans to serve as soldiers. So they're allowed to engage in combat now, and war laborers. Before all of that, only white male citizens were allowed to be in the service. Before this act, states had exclusive control over their militias. After this act was passed, the president got more federal control. The new law gave Lincoln the ability to call upon militias for national service, reducing state authority. Although it did not introduce full conscription, so this wasn't a mandatory draft, it gave the states the ability have to answer that call and have a little draft for themselves if they're not measuring up to the quotas that were placed upon them. It did set the stage for a full conscription. The Enrollment Act of 1863, we'll get there soon. And it also made it so wealthy men could pay their way out. I think there was also like a slave stipulation. If you had more than 20 slaves, you didn't have to go to war. This created a bit of a rift between the like weaponized divisiveness, because the people that couldn't pay the $300 whatever would have to go to war, whether they believed in what they were fighting for or not. The less wealthy men grew bitter, and they were like, this is a rich man's war, but a poor man's fight. Weaponization of differences. There were harsh penalties for draft dodgers and deserters, such as fines up to $300, imprisonment, branding with a D. Like they would brand their body with the letter D, like on their face or somewhere else. So people knew that they were deserters of the militia, or they were sentenced to work hard labor in military prisons. There were a lot of their execution by firing squad. There are a lot of people that were killed because they dodged or deserted the draft. There were some governors that resisted, seeing it as federal overreach, like Thomas Bramlett, who was a Kentucky governor, and then John S. Carlisle, who was a senator in Virginia. They did not want to give up that power. They thought maintaining the power of the states, the authority of the states, was a really important thing to engage in. So they were not very excited about the dissolution of the boundaries of the state. In 1863, we get into further dissolution of individual autonomy, because now the Enrollment Act has been passed, and the Enrollment Act required all men of a certain age to register for the military draft, whether they believed in what they were fighting for or not. So that is just dissolving individual autonomy, because you're saying you must fight in this war. You have to, or the consequences will be great. Whether you believe in it or not, it doesn't matter. They're taking that choice away. So Neptune and Aries dissolving individual autonomy. Could also, like, it doesn't need to be that way. It can be reimagining new ways to bolster individual autonomy, creating new options for how to get more power to individuals and power to states. And we don't need to wait on our government to do that for ourselves. So if this is freaking you out and thinking like, oh my God, there's going to be a draft, don't go there. But I do encourage you to find out the ways that you can assert your individual autonomy. There's so much you can do within the legal system. Like, I don't know how much I want to get into that, because I'm not an expert by any means, but I have a couple different friends and acquaintances that I know have taken a lot of their legal autonomy back by breaking contracts that they didn't know that they signed with the government. So there's a really big world out there of what's possible, and I don't want you to feel confined to what you know, because there's more solutions. Let's move right along to 1864. We will, let me see, I think talk about Sherman's march to the sea. So that was a particular battle within the Civil War. Major General William Tecumseh Sherman led a military campaign from November 15th of 1864 to December 21st. And they had what they called a scorched path policy, which was to destroy everything that you can. It doesn't matter if it's hospitals, it doesn't matter if it's like food kitchens, it doesn't matter if it's women and children, destroy everything. So they would seek out and destroy military targets, as well as industry, civilians, and infrastructure, which had a big ripple effect. It disrupted the Confederacy's economy and ultimately resulted in their demise. It blurred the lines even further, though, because he was giving commands. Aries, the leader, was telling his soldiers to destroy everything. And that is involving people who were not supposed to be involved in the war at all, which is civilians, women and children. Like, those are meant to be protected peoples. in, I might have these mixed up. I think that one came, that was November 16th to the 21st. So let's go back just a hair to August 22nd, 1864. This is when the Geneva Convention happened. The Geneva Convention is essentially a code of ethics for warfare. It's like not laws, but we're supposed to follow them. It's like rules that kind of force compassion into warfare. So very Neptune and Aries. The Geneva Convention is the basis on which rests the rules of international law for the protection of the victims of armed conflicts. I'm going to say that again. It is the basis on which rests the rules of international law for the protection of the victims of armed conflicts. It's been revised a couple times. It was revised and replaced in 1906, 1929, and 1949. So maybe someday I'll look at those dates and see if what was going on, if there was any kind of Neptune activity. Geneva Convention is linked with the Red Cross, and I just think that's funny. Neptune, Pisces, 12th house is all like, I think Jesus and Pisces go really well together. Both are represented by a fish. And it was just about like, we love your neighbor, treat everyone the way you want to be treated. It's like that big spiritual compassion and unconditional love. So I just think it's funny that the Geneva Convention, which was founded when Neptune was in Aries, code of conduct for warfare, bringing compassion onto the battlefield, was represented by a cross. The cross indicated that it was like it was safe, like it was okay for you to approach that. International set of laws governing treatment and care for wounded and prisoners of war. This was started by Henry Dunant. He was a relief activist. He witnessed the Battle of Solferino, 1859. That battle, there were 40,000 wounded soldiers left on the field after the battle was done because there wasn't the right facilities, they didn't have the right personnel, etc. This Henry Dunant urged the calling together of an international conference and soon co-founded with Swiss lawyer Gustave Moynier the International Committee of the Red Cross in 1863. So that was founded within this window of Neptune and Aries. It derived its obligatory force from the implied consent of the states which accepted and applied them in the conduct of their military operations. So some of the tenets of this would be the immunity from capture and destruction of all establishments for the treatment of wounded and sick soldiers. So that says it's not okay to bomb hospitals, even if they're enemy hospitals. It's not okay to go into enemy hospitals and capture wounded and sick soldiers that are in there. The impartial reception and treatment of all combatants. So anyone that needs treatment can get treatment. The protection of civilians, providing aid to the wounded. So if civilians are helping, like they can't be targets. They have to be left out of the battle. The recognition of the Red Cross symbol as a means for identifying persons and equipment covered by the agreement. So that kind of clears up murky waters. If you see that Red Cross, you know that's a safe spot to go. There were a couple of articles. I wasn't sure if those were amended as the years went on or if this was a part of the original, but they're there nonetheless. Article 12 said that wounded and sick soldiers who are out of battle should not be killed, injured, tortured, or subject to bioexperimentation. It's very thorough. Obligation to respect medical units and establishments, personnel entrusted with the care of the wounded, buildings and material medical transports. Article 15 said wounded and sick soldiers should be collected, cared for, and protected, though they may become prisoners of war. So that's just you have to take care of the people first, and then you can make them a prisoner of war. You should not deny a medical treatment. And then Article 16 was to record the identity of dead and wounded and transmit those details to the opposition. So people know which of their soldiers and their friends and their family members have been injured or even killed in battle. This is super Neptune and Aries. The code of ethics established for battle, how to handle wounded soldiers. The Geneva Convention chart has some interesting characteristics. So that, let's see, let me pause this and I'll pull up the Geneva Convention chart. So this is just the first Geneva Convention chart. I guess I put it at 12 a.m. That's probably not when it was. Let's say it was at 12 p.m. at noon. They got together. Cool. So we're just guessing. So we're not going to hold a whole bunch of weight to where these planets are placed. But Neptune was in Aries. That's super cute. We've got Pallas Athena here in Pisces. Pallas Athena is the goddess of wisdom and war. So Pisces is very associated with Neptune. It has a lot of those same like idealism and dreaminess and compassion, imagination, blurred boundaries. So the goddess of wisdom and war is in that sign, bringing some compassion down to all of us here. Saturn in Libra is responsibility around relationships. That's so funny. That's what the Geneva Convention is for, relationships between countries and groups of people that are in direct conflict with one another. So definitely responsibility to relationship. We've got Pluto very close to the South Node. South Node is kind of North Node would be your higher evolutionary option, your path that would take you to the most evolved version of yourself, whereas the South Node would be the opposite. That would be like the tendencies that you fall back on that are just easier. They're not going to help you grow, but they're easier. So interesting that Pluto, the planet of transformation, is so close to that point of potentiality in the sky. Asking people to transform their monkey minds and to be evolved humans and not take, torture, kill, bioexperiment on already wounded peoples. Let's see, the sun was at the last degree of Leo. That's just anything at the last degree is a little bit more notable because it's the last little push of that sign's energy. So in this guesstimated chart, that is very close to the midheaven. So just making it very illuminated and bright. So we'll switch back over to the US natal chart. So I asked AI, I put all this information about those 4 years into everything that I researched into ChatGPT and just say, like if this is what happened the last time Neptune was in Aries, and considering the whole climate of everything right now, could you make some predictions based on patterns that happened back then? Like how will those patterns kind of represent themselves in the modern and today? So ChatGPT gave me a lot of thoughts. It said the rise of ideological warriors and activist movements. And I thought that's brilliant. Ideological warrior is totally Neptune in Aries. Let me remove the transit so we can come back to, well, I guess we'll just put up the most today's transits. So we can see where Neptune is. So Neptune in Aries fuels idealistic and passionate action, which could lead to a surge in activism across political and social spheres. Um, there can be there's potential for a rise in leaderless or decentralized movements. If Neptune dissolves in Aries's leadership, then I could see where it would come up with that decentralized movements, especially with Neptune moving through the United States fourth house. That's like bringing some of its illusion, confusion to the motherland, to home. So I think that makes a lot of sense where ideology takes precedence over structure. Aries isn't very structure oriented. It's more action oriented, and Neptune is certainly not structure oriented. When I think of Neptune, I think of mist. I've said that a million times, but it's still so true. All mist is a body of water that has like floated up into the air and all the molecules have dispersed. So um, not structure oriented at all. Imagination doesn't have structure. Compassion doesn't have structure, even though we gave it a little bit of structure with the Geneva Convention. Dreams don't have structure. All that stuff, it's relatively structureless. So it provided some examples of what that might be, like online grassroots activism, decentralized political movements, and then also the line between martyrdom and heroism can blur, or the willingness to take extreme action for personal beliefs. So one of the with Pisces and Neptune, some of the themes or concepts that can come up would be that the savior and victim complex. That can be that's a blurry space to enter because the savior might not be aware that they're trying to save. The victim might not be aware that they are in a victim mindset. And so it becomes this really strange kind of toxic ebb and flow between two individuals where there's a lot of power between the two of them, and it's just misused. The whole savior victim complex seems like it comes from a good place. Like you care. That's why you're trying to save your friend, your family member, your significant other, whatever. But that is actually a coping mechanism. It's helping you, the savior, to feel better. It's not empowering the victim. So I think that's something that we're all going to have to think about a little bit. Whether we're forced to because we're witnessing it in some capacity, or um yeah, I think it's just an important concept to contemplate. So you can think about your own personal relationships and just ask yourself if you're a savior or a victim in either any of them. And then we have to break that with our government. I think government's weird. And I feel kind of unpopular in that belief. And here's why. So we need government, right? We need it because there's bad people out there. We need to be protected. It keeps us safe. It may, like that's the main argument for why we need a government. So the solution to that problem is to have someone from that population of potentially bad people to give them all the power and rule over everybody. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think it's really strange. And I think that it takes a lot of our personal responsibility away. I think that a lot of us have mother and father wounds. That's a very interesting psychology to read into, to think about, to examine for all of us as individuals. But I think a lot of our mother-father wounds, like we want to be cared for and protected by our parents, and we have misplaced that and put it on the government, mommy government and or mommy medicine and daddy government. It's their responsibility now to make sure that we are healthy and well and provided for and cared for. And I think it's the biggest load of shit ever. I I don't think any of those people, we can't think about groups of people that are this big. Not our brains are not meant to comprehend that. So these people can't make decisions considering everybody. They can't. We can't. I can't. You can't. I don't think we can. I think we're trying to do something that is much too big, and I don't think it works with all the people that we have, all the different people that we have. So I think personal responsibility is a big fucking deal. I think it is one of the only solutions to this weird climate that we're in now. So look at that for yourself. Is there a victim savior complex between you and the pharmaceutical industry or politics? Like, do you, I don't know. I don't want to ruffle too many feathers, but I think I think it's so important to think about that. And if you determine that you are in a savior victim relationship with your doctors or whoever else, like start to just hold it in your mind and be curious about how you can start to take some of that autonomy back, because we know by looking at the past that autonomy erodes when Neptune is in Aries, and the best thing you can do for yourself is to take some of that power back. So um yeah, that was my rant. The line between martyrdom and heroism blurs. That's a little bit of that same thing. um Themes of freedom, personal sovereignty and rebellion against government control or institutional power can intensify with this kind of energy. Social movements adopting more aggressive militant strategies, Aries. Gun control battles escalating with radicalized factions emerging on both sides. Rising cult-like movement where spiritual ideologies merge with warrior culture. So that's an interesting blend, but I don't think any of this is new. I think that we've seen a lot of this going on just over time anyway. The historical parallel here would be the disarmament of the South during Reconstruction, a modern version, which is they disarmed the South. So a modern version could be targeted at specific groups that are deemed as threats. ChatGPT also said there could be shifts in warfare and military strategy. America may redefine its military identity, possibly moving towards more unconventional warfare tactics, cyber warfare, and AI military strategies. And that also is really complemented by Pluto in Aquarius, transformation through innovation, through technology, through new inventions, and like progress on that plane. So I think that's really interesting. Those two planets are going to be feeding each other a lot of energy over the next couple years. I think that this also looks like big changes in money for the US with Pluto being in the second house. It has been in the second house for a while. So this isn't like I'm not I don't know. There's a lot of talk about like just changing our money and how we do money here. So I would be curious, I guess, to see when Pluto made that shift for America. That was at 14 degrees of Capricorn. So let's see. That is like 2015 is when that kind of talk, or that's when Pluto shifted into the house of money, spending and saving habits, values, personal assets. It was a bit of a breakaway. Let's see, increased military recruitment and issues surrounding it. Disillusionment or radicalization of young soldiers may also be themes. Disillusionment is totally a Neptune kind of a thing. Potential for military conflicts or escalating tensions, particularly as Neptune in Aries dissolves old alliances and creates new ones. It can be blurred lines within warfare, just a little bit more confusing. Like there's so many ways that could be. It could be like fake news type military coverage where they're trying to elicit a certain response from the public. So they're giving certain footage that like lends itself well to that. Also like AI, and they could just generate footage of things, videos, photos, whatever. Um, I could see that possibly being an issue. Increased global, I already said that, cyber AI driven and proxy conflicts, military draft or conscription debates, particularly for cyber or AI driven forces. I don't really know what that means. I guess there are like AI robots and whatever, expansion of private military companies, PMCs, leading to less government accountability. And the historical parallel here would be the 1863 Conscription Act, the Civil War draft law that was it went along really well with Neptune and Aries, forcing men to serve unless they could buy their way out. A modern version could involve economic coercion or required service options. So depending on your net income or whether you speak out against people on the internet or, well, whatever, like they could use some of those kinds of tactics to innovate their draft process. Who knows? Erosion of individual and state autonomy. We talked about that a lot with 1861 through 1864. This can look like federal overreach or centralization of power, leading to new conflicts over states' rights. Expansion of government surveillance through AI, biometric tracking, and digital IDs. There's a lot of that. We talked about that, I think, moving into 2024 or 2023 with Pluto going into Aquarius. They can use data from all the things that measure your data and put your biometrics in the cloud. Like, I know that. I avoided getting one of these for a long time because of it, but I kind of figured they probably already have all my shit anyway, and I just want to know how I'm sleeping, okay? Um, so that can be, they can use that in like advertising and just monitoring how your heart rate responds to certain advertisements. And I don't even want to know all of the tactics that go into advertising, but that would make sense with Neptune being responsible for advertisement in terms of the planets, and then Aries individuality, autonomy, and physicality. Aries has a lot to do, like the first house has a lot to do with your body and your physicality. So advertising based on your biometrics makes sense. Government property seizures, particularly in cryptocurrency, firearms, or foreign property ownership. Erosion of states' rights could continue, particularly in areas where the federal government asserts power over public health, gun laws, and AI regulation. This could also be increased federal control over law enforcement, perhaps through national policing reforms or increased DOJ oversight over state and local police forces. Expansion of federal emergency powers in response to climate disasters, economic instability, or military conflicts. When they enact emergency situations, a lot of laws go out the window. Like when it's an emergency, we get to just make up new rules. And I don't know. I don't know how like forthcoming they need to be about that, but I do think it's interesting to just be aware of if anything goes into any kind of emergency status, just to pay attention to what's going on. And then surveillance expansion with AI, biometric tracking, digital IDs, personal freedoms could erode in the name of security. So they could package it up as like, in order to stay safe, we need you to give over some more of your rights. And I think there's a quote about that. Something about when you give up rights for the name of safety, you lose both or something. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look that up. The historical parallel here with these comments was the Confiscation Acts of 1861 and 1862, allowing the government to seize property from rebels. Who gets to determine who's a rebel? A modern version might involve freezing bank accounts or digital assets under new national security laws. The Reconstruction Acts 1867 through 68 placed Southern states under military rule, weakening state autonomy. A modern version might involve federal overrides on state decisions regarding abortions, firearms, or border policies. There can be potential inflationary bubbles with massive wealth redistribution and just potential changes to the economic climate. Shift away from the US dollar might lead to economic instability, and then government versus private tech industry conflicts over AI, automation, and cyber dominance. ChatGPT did a really good job with coming up with these. Technological and cultural revolutions in entertainment. I feel like that's kind of been bubbling up for a little bit. Neptune's visionary energy in Aries could bring bold, action-oriented storytelling in film, music, and media. Expect a surge in AI-generated content. We already have been expecting that with Pluto and Aquarius. Interactive entertainment that's like really engaging for your physicality, and hyper realistic virtual experiences that again blur the line between reality and imagination or illusion. There's potential for AI-driven propaganda and reality warping. I love this. The Neptune fog combined with Aries' forceful messaging will make distinguishing reality from AI-generated information extremely difficult. So again, this is not meant to be scary. Who even knows how this energy is going to express? I think that it doesn't hurt to just be aware. If you are consuming information online all the time, I don't know. I don't know that that is a good way. I don't know that that is a good way to treat yourself. Like, they make social media and news now. I feel like news has learned a lot from social media, and just increasing clicks and increasing views. And I think it's kind of one and the same now. Like, they're all trying to get more views. They're all trying to get more clicks. They're all trying to get more ratings. And it just seems like there's a lot of parallels between the news media and then social media. The superhero archetype may evolve, moving from traditional figures to more anarchistic, rebellious anti-heroes in popular culture. This has kind of happened again with social media influencers. Like, they kind of have taken over. Like, celebrities don't have the same domain that they used to have because influencers have stepped in, and they've kind of, taken some of the spotlight away. So there can be some of that. We might see more of the superhero archetype, anarchistic and rebellious anti-heroes. I'm not really sure. Rebellious. When I see rebellious, I think more of Uranus, which is over here in the US 6th house. It is approaching natal Uranus. So, maybe as this gap closes between these two, maybe we'll see a little bit more of the rebellious anti-heroes or the anarchistic things in popular culture. The job displacement due to automation could lead to protests and unrest, and then that just changes individual autonomy kind of all over again. We kind of have to readjust and figure out where to reinsert ourselves if we were displaced by automation. And then development of AI human hybrid workers or workforces, particularly in military sectors. And it gave me a current trend. It said the 2024 AI executive order already laid groundwork for AI regulation. Expect major legislation in this area by 2026 to 2027. Thanks, ChatGPT. The illusion of strength and leadership shifts. America may project an image of strength, but hidden weaknesses in its leadership structure. Political figures may attempt dramatic, bold, or performative leadership. I could see that with Aries, but also with Leo, performative leadership. Political, but they might struggle with scandals, deception, or misguided idealism. And we'll have to look for that ourselves. Like, they're not going to outright say that they're being deceptive or that they're being misguided. We have to come to those conclusions on our own. And with all the AI and the like potential for reality warping. I think that that can just be, it can be kind of tricky, but guess what? If you're strong within yourself, if you've taken care of your own self, your own people, you put yourself in a good position, you make good networks, you are hard to kill because you're taking care of your body and your mind and your spirit, then it doesn't matter what they're lying about. It doesn't matter if they are involved in a scandal. It doesn't matter if they're being deceiving because you are intact, you are strong, you are connected with yourself, you've got your strong network. And I think that is just, I think that's the best way to operate with this energy. A new generation of aggressive or charismatic leaders could emerge, either inspiring hope or leading with misplaced idealism. That's that like toxic, I don't even know the word I want to use, the toxic patriotism, I guess. I don't know if that might be a conflict of, it might be an oxymoron. It might not exist. You might think that I'm crazy for thinking that patriotism could be toxic. I don't know. But I could see patriotism and idealism to me just kind of like go together. Rise of nationalistic and heroic leaders with strong warrior-like personas, radical political realignments, dissolving traditional party structures, or potential emergence of more authoritarian-leaning movements. The weaponization of spirituality, Neptune in Aries. I feel like some of that is going on already. Some of the spiritual communities, it's just like an industrial complex. I don't know. I guess it's a stepping stone. Some people need to start there to get themselves into a better spot. But whether you're looking at political leaders or holistic people, holistic leaders, we all need to remember the savior victim complex. We all need to remember that those are just people. They're just people. They're not gurus. They're not lords. They're not gods. They're not deities of any kind. They're just freaking people. So I think that is super important to remember, no matter who you're dealing with, whether, again, like I said, it's a political leader or maybe it's a like medical leader or I don't know. My friend and I were joking about the shaman industrial complex recently because it feels like a wild world to walk into. Neptune dissolves traditional boundaries, and in Aries, this could be the rise of spiritual movements that emphasize self-reliance and warrior-like faith. Oh my God, that's basically what I just said. Um, I think that that sounds really positive for all of us, as long as we're not putting all of our eggs in someone else's basket. That's the main thing that freaks me out about the shaman industrial complex is people giving their power to others to heal them, to lead them, to guide them. Like, I don't know. It's useful to have support. It's useful to have validation. It's useful to have a guide that's kind of like nudging you in directions, but you have your own internal wisdom and your own internal guidance, and you can source validation from yourself. And I think it's important to have a balance. I think we need to be able to source validation from within without demonizing how good it is to get support from others. But if we can't do both, then I think it needs to be addressed. More people may reject traditional religious structures in favor of personalized or militant spiritual ideologies. Example, extreme survivalist or sovereign citizen ideologies. I could see that too. Neptune in Aries rejecting traditional religious structures and taking more of a self approach. Like, this is what feels good to me. I don't need to go sit in a sanctuary with 200 other people. Like, I'm gonna feed my faith in what way I want to. And I think that makes sense. I know my mom still goes to the same church that I went to when I was little. She went there when she was little. It's kind of just a tradition, but they've changed so much over the years. Their youth program has dissolved. They've got less and less members. And I just wonder, I think that people are finding their own ways. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it is a little bit bittersweet for people that really value that strong tradition. So The intersection of technology and spirituality could lead to AI-driven religious experiences or virtual faith-based communities. I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting. Revival of extreme religious ideologies, including nationalist and militarized sects. Fusion of religion with AI leading to AI-driven spiritual leaders. That's interesting. I've never really thought about that. I don't know if that feels super right to me. I guess we'll just have to see what happens over now until 2039. Health medicine and the illusion of invincibility. Bold new medical advancements, possibly stem cells, biohacking, AI-driven treatments could emerge, but Neptune's illusionary nature may lead to over promises or unexpected consequences. When Neptune is moving around the first house, your rising sign, that is a time you're more likely to be misdiagnosed than any other time. I had a client who had Neptune right on her rising sign, and I said that, I was like, you're more prone to medical misdiagnosis. And she's like, shut up. I just got misdiagnosed twice with this simple little eye issue. And she's like, it's been so frustrating. So I think that if there's anything wild that pops up, like remember that there are ripples, there are consequences, and it's important to see. It's important. Usually if it seems to be good to be true, it is. So if any advancements come out that just seem wildly too good to be true, I think it's important to take your time and find out as many details as you can, as much information as you can. Like you find it, not asking your doctor to provide it to you. This is individual autonomy. This is Aries. It is you taking leadership over your own health. It's shocking to me how few people really look at medical journals and look for the methodology in the studies that people tout as like, look at this evidence, follow the science, trust the science. Like, yes, and that methodology is not science. It's not science. So you can't say that if you don't look at the methodology of the study. The idea of the superhuman body. I wonder if they were thinking about Elon Musk and his neural link when they responded with this. Through extreme fitness trends, neurotropics, and radical self-improvement methods may become a little bit more mainstream. So maybe we will start to see people taking more responsibility for their individual autonomy, their individual selves. Potential for misinformation or scandals related to medical and pharmaceutical industries, particularly in military-related medical research. Very interesting. That's not familiar at all. Just kidding. Bioengineered super soldiers and robotic enhancements in warfare, federally enforced medical interventions, including psychiatric regulations. That's really interesting. Neptune does have a lot to do with the psyche. And yeah, that's really interesting. Psychedelics used for training, mind control, or spiritual warfare programs. We know they've done that in the past. Let's not pretend like it just could never happen again. Current trend, the Biden administration has already increased federal oversight of healthcare policies. Neptune in Aries could push it forward or push it toward more invasive public health policies. I don't really know. I haven't examined everything that the Trump administration is doing on that front. So I don't really have that much to add. The next little section is new space race and militarization of space. I think that makes sense. Didn't Donald Trump like start the US Space Force or something? I don't know. Guess I should look into that a little bit more. Increased competition for space dominance among world powers, the development of orbital defense systems and AI-driven satellite warfare, and then potentially militarized settlements on the moon and Mars. Very like that's like imagination land right there. That's so wild. Wow, Neptune and Aries, let's go. I just was thinking about when they landed on the moon. I'll have to look at that chart. Maybe we'll do a deep dive on that one too, especially if more space stuff comes up over the next couple years. climate disasters and eco-terrorism, massive wildfires, droughts, forced migrations due to climate instability, conflicts over water scarcity and essential resources, and then climate activism becoming more extreme with sabotage or cyber warfare targeting major industries. Okay, redefining American identity and patriotism. Neptune and Aries may bring a battle over what it means to be American. That's really interesting. With different groups pushing competing versions of national identity. Expect rebranding of national symbols like the flag, the anthem, and then foundational myths that like the stories of the founding fathers. And I guess that's not all myths, but I don't know, George Washington and the cherry tree. Would that be a myth or a legend? Modifying some of those tales to reflect a more idealistic or revolutionary spirit, and then a surge in individualistic patriotism rather than collective nationalism. More people may define their Americanness based on personal values rather than institutional loyalty. That sounds healthy. That sounds like it's more authentic. It's coming from people's hearts instead of just looking at what is presented and blindly accepting it. Let's see. Neptune in Aries tends to dissolve old structures of autonomy while creating new forms of forced participation in national efforts. The three biggest legal battles in the United States will likely revolve around the role of federal power over states, like emergency powers, policing, and governance, personal autonomy versus national security. That comes back to the conscription, the draft idea, digital identity, medical mandates, the rise of AI regulation and property control, digital economy laws, asset seizures, and AI governance. I think ChatGPT said prepare for ideological turbulence, fact-checked information before reacting, balance action with clarity, avoid rushing into battles that might be illusions, and then stay grounded in personal truth. Neptune in Aries encourages personal heroism, but beware of getting swept up into collective delusions. That is some really sound advice from a non-human cyborg. So thank you very much, ChatGPT. We will come back to this time frame again soon, as soon as I can do a little bit more research. If you have any questions about any of those points that I made, please feel free to drop them down below. And again, I'm not saying that any of that is going to happen. I'm just saying that we can gain a lot of information by looking at the patterns that have happened before us, because history might not repeat itself exactly, and that's fine. Like, we don't need history to repeat itself, but the patterns will give us insight for how to meet the time at hand. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.